On the first cold Monday after Thanksgiving, Isaiah Bell rode past his own north field and counted 17 white flags in the ditch line. 17. Not survey stakes exactly, not fence markers. Just thin white flags with blue writing on them, snapping in the wind beside the soybeans. At first, Isaiah thought the county had come to mark a gas line. Then he saw the last flag. It was planted 6 feet inside the Bell land, and the man driving him to the heart clinic saw Isaiah's hand close around the cane in his lap. "You want me to turn around?" Marcus asked. Isaiah kept looking out the window. "No," he said. "Doctor's been fussing long enough." That was how Isaiah spoke when something had already hurt him. He made it sound like weather. The truck they were riding in was not his. It belonged to Marcus Reed, a 32-year-old hired man who lived in the old wash house at the back of the place. Isaiah's truck was gone. A blue 2003 Chevy Silverado with cracked vinyl seats, 189,000 miles, and a radio that only played out of the left speaker. His daughter, Naomi, had taken it 4 days earlier while Isaiah was at choir practice. She used the spare key hidden under the broken flower pot by the kitchen steps, the place her mother had used for 20 years. Naomi sold it in Pine Bluff for $8,750, then sent one text. "I took what I was owed. We need to talk about the land." Isaiah had not answered. He was 76 years old. He had a blood pressure, reading the nurse did not like, a left knee that sounded like gravel, and 72 acres in the Arkansas Delta that he believed still knew his name. What he did not know, not yet, was that a company called Pine Gate Land Group had already bought a small piece of that land on paper. What he did not know was that in 10 days, a judge would be asked to sell all 72 acres, the house, the barn, the wash house where Marcus slept, the pecan row, the cemetery plot beside Mount Zion where Isaiah's wife, Celia, had been waiting 7 years, all of it, over a fraction so small Isaiah would not have believed it could move anything. But paper has its own weather, and some storms do not show on the sky. The Delta does not rise much, it spreads. A man can stand on a turn row out there and watch rain coming from 20 minutes away. He can see the grain elevator long before he reaches it. He can see a single dog crossing a road half a mile off. Isaiah Bell had spent most of his life learning those 72 acres like a body. He knew where the gumbo mud held water too long. He knew the high patch that dried first after a hard storm. He knew which corner near the drainage ditch would grow Johnson grass before it grew anything useful. And he knew the field his grandfather had cleared with 2 mules, a rented blade, and hands split open so often the cracks never quite healed. Isaiah knew all of that. What he had not known how to do was teach it to his children. He had thought the land itself would do the teaching. He had thought showing up was a language anybody could understand. He had been wrong. Marcus turned the heater knob twice, though it changed nothing. "You cold?" he asked. "I've been cold before," Isaiah said. That was the end of that conversation. They passed Mount Zion Baptist, white clapboard, green roof. Cemetery leaning behind it. Isaiah lifted 2 fingers from his knee as they went by. Not a wave. Not exactly. More like a man touching a memory without stopping the car. Marcus saw it and kept his eyes on the road. There were things you let an old man do in private, even when you were sitting close enough to hear him breathe. Isaiah Bell was born in 1950 in a tenant house with newspaper in the walls and smoke stains on the ceiling. His grandfather, Moses Bell, worked land owned by a planter named Leland Fitch, and every September the books came out wrong. Cotton weighed less after it left Moses's sack. Seed cost more after it reached the commissary. A mule doctor somehow appeared in the ledger even in years. No mule had been seen by anybody sick. That was not bad math, that was the system. And in that system, a black family could labor all year and still end up owing money to the man whose field they had made valuable. Moses Bell could not read a newspaper, but he could read a scale. He kept his own numbers in a syrup tin under the stove. Pounds picked, gin price, seed charge, meal charge, interest. For 16 years, Moses' numbers and Fitch's numbers did not agree. For 16 years, Moses said nothing, because saying something in that county could cost a man more than wages. But he saved. He saved in sugar jars. He saved behind a loose brick in the smokehouse. He saved once inside a hollow fence post, wrapped in oilcloth against the rain. And in 1971, when 72 acres of low cropland came up because the Fitch heirs wanted cash and distance, Moses Bell put on his best hat, took a bus to the courthouse, and bought it for $5,600. Bills so worn they felt like cloth. He came home before dark, laid the deed on the kitchen table, and made each child touch it. Isaiah was 21. He remembered his grandfather's thumb pressed into the paper. He remembered the old man saying, "Long as our name stays on this, nobody gets to move us just because they got tired of looking at us." Nobody wrote that sentence down. That was the trouble with families like the Bells. They remembered everything that mattered except the things that had to be filed. Moses died in 1978 without a will. He did not trust lawyers. He barely trusted banks, and he believed the deed had already said enough. In his mind, the land belonged to his 5 children equally. In the law's mind, it did too, but not the way Moses imagined. It passed to all 5 at once, undivided. Each child held a fraction. Then when one of those children died, that fraction split again, then again, then again. The field stayed whole under the sun, but on paper it became pieces no eye could see. That is heirs' property. It is quiet for years, sometimes for generations. Then one envelope arrives from a lawyer, and a family learns that the ground under the porch is not one thing anymore. It is a crowd. Isaiah had paid the taxes every year, $1,326 the last year, out of a Social Security check, a small bean lease, and whatever he could still coax out of the south field. He had paid the drainage district fee. He had fixed the culvert. He had patched the barn roof with tin from the old chicken house. He believed that was ownership, work, taxes, memory, graves. But the law was keeping another book. By the time Isaiah turned 76, 29 living people held some interest in the Bell place. Most were cousins in St. Louis, Milwaukee, Little Rock, Kansas City. Some had never seen the property. One cousin owned 1/60th and did not know the county existed. Isaiah did not know their names. Marcus did. The heart clinic sat beside a pawn shop and a closed catfish place in a brick building that smelled of coffee, alcohol wipes, and old magazines. Marcus signed Isaiah in because Isaiah's hand shook when he wrote now, and he hated people waiting behind him watching the pen jump. They sat under a television showing a home renovation program with no sound. A young couple on the screen smiled inside a kitchen that had more light fixtures than Isaiah's whole house. "You don't have to sit here," Isaiah said. "Go get breakfast." "I ate." "No, you didn't. I'm still sitting." Isaiah looked over at him, and for a second the sharpness left his face. "You ever ride with your daddy somewhere you still remember?" Marcus did not answer right away. His father had never been a person so much as a blank space on a form. His mother died when he was 7. After that, homes came and went, some kind, some clean, some neither. "No, sir," Marcus said, "not like that." Isaiah nodded. "My granddaddy took me to buy this land. Didn't tell me where we were going. I thought we were going about a tractor part." He turned his funeral hat in his lap. Got to the courthouse and I saw his hand shaking. First time I ever knew grown men got scared. He was carrying $5,600 in his coat. Every dollar he had pulled away from people who meant to keep it. Isaiah looked at the silent television. "I had 2 children. I don't know that I ever took them anywhere they could understand what I was trying to give them," Marcus said. Maybe they understood more than you think. Isaiah's mouth moved like he might smile. No, he said. They understood what I made them miss. The nurse called his name. Isaiah stood slowly, squared his shoulders, and went back like a man entering a room where he meant not to beg. Marcus sat alone and took out his phone. On the screen was a photograph of a certified letter. It had arrived 2 days earlier. Isaiah handed it to him because the print was small and the language was smaller. Marcus had read it once, then again. Then a third time because some sentences do not become real the first time they enter the room. The letter said Pinegate Land Group had acquired an ownership interest in the Bell property described in Deed Book 58, page 211. It said Pinegate intended to file an action for partition. It said the hearing was set for the 10th day of the following month. It said Isaiah Bell had the right to appear and be heard. Right to appear. Right to be heard, like that was the same as having the right to stay. When Marcus finished reading, Isaiah had stood at Celia's sink with both hands on the counter. For a long time he said nothing. Then he said, "Read me the part that says they can take a house without buying it from the man living in it." Marcus read it again. Isaiah folded the letter into 4 careful squares and placed it inside the syrup tin on the shelf above the stove. Moses Bell's tin. The one that had once held the second set of numbers. Then Isaiah went outside and worked until dark. That was when Marcus decided the old man would not carry the rest of the truth alone. But he still did not tell him yet, because Marcus Reed had already been carrying it for 4 years. Marcus first came to the Bell place at 24, thin as a fence rail. Fresh out of 11 months in Cummins on a charge from a fight he had lost before it started. He had no car, no family close enough to call, no employer willing to look past the little square on the application that asked the question and ended the interview. He was walking Highway 79 looking for day work when Isaiah's old hay truck coughed dead beside the mailbox. The starter had been grinding for weeks. Isaiah had been pretending not to hear it. Marcus stopped at the end of the drive and asked if he could look. Isaiah asked, "You know trucks?" Marcus said. "I know when one's tired of being lied to." That was the first thing he ever said that made Isaiah laugh. He crawled under the truck in the dust, cleaned the cables, shimmed the starter with a washer, and got it turning before sunset. Isaiah offered $20. Marcus would not take it. Not out of pride. Out of hunger for something that was not money. Isaiah recognized the look because his grandfather had worn it around men who thought they owned the air. So he said, "Barn roof leaks. Come by tomorrow if you want work." Marcus came by. Then he kept coming. The first winter, he slept in a storage room behind the shop, with a space heater Isaiah worried over like it was a baby. The second winter, Celia made him move into the old wash house and hung curtains herself. Celia Bell had a way of feeding people that did not ask permission. She would put a plate in front of Marcus like his chair had always been there. Cornbread, greens, neck bones, peach preserves when she had them. The first time she did it, Marcus waited for somebody to say he was taking too much. Nobody did. Celia was the one who taught him that the Bell land was not scenery. She walked the rows in the evenings when her knees still let her, pointing with a dish towel she always forgot to put down. "That patch there," she told him, "is where Moses lost a mule in the mud and cursed so bad the preacher heard it from the road. That pecan tree is where Isaiah asked me to marry him, and I said no because he asked like he was ordering seed. That low place by the ditch is where we buried the dog that bit the mailman and everybody pretended to be sorry." Marcus listened, not because he loved farming at first, because he had never heard people speak of a place as if the dead still had work to do there. One evening Celia said something he later wrote on the back of an old feed receipt. "Baby, ground don't make you free by itself, but it gives your back somewhere to straighten." He folded that receipt and kept it in his wallet until the paper went soft. Celia died 3 years later. A stroke in the laundry room. Fast, ordinary, cruel. Isaiah found her with a basket of towels beside her, and for 6 months he would not let anybody move the basket. Marcus moved it finally. Not because Isaiah asked. Because grief had made the house stop breathing, and somebody had to open a window. After Celia, Isaiah got quieter. He worked later. He sang bass at Mount Zion like he was holding up a wall nobody else could see. Marcus stayed. He learned the language of Isaiah's silence. A slammed cabinet. A light left on in the barn. Coffee poured and not touched. What nobody said was that Marcus had become the child who remained, and that was the thing Isaiah's real children could feel before they could name it. Caleb Bell was the older child, 47, in Dallas, where every job he held sounded better than it paid. Regional accounts manager, client success lead, senior operations consultant, titles that looked fine on a LinkedIn page and disappeared when rent came due. Caleb had grown up believing his father loved the land more than him. He had evidence if he wanted it. Isaiah missed games because rain was coming. Missed a school award because the combine belt snapped. Answered teenage anger with chores. Answered fear with instructions. Caleb learned early that if he wanted words from his father, he would have to translate work into love by himself. He did not want to translate, so he left. Army first, then Texas, then a life built around not needing anything from a field in Arkansas. By 47, that life was cracking. A failed trucking partnership, a personal guarantee he had signed too fast. A daughter at a private college who believed her father had things handled because he smiled when he said he did. Caleb needed money with the panic of a man whose shoes are still dry, but who can hear water under the door. Then a man named Hollis Vane took him to lunch. Hollis worked for Pine Gate Land Group. He was smooth in the way people become smooth when other people's confusion pays their bills. He explained what Caleb did not know. The Bell land was heirs-property. Isaiah did not own it outright. Caleb owned a sliver through his mother, Celia, because Celia had once bought a loose share from a cousin to keep it in the family. Caleb could sell that sliver, and once Pine Gate owned it, Pine Gate could ask the court to partition the property. "You're not selling your father's house," Hollis said. "You're selling your legal interest. The court decides the rest." That sentence was built to give a drowning man clean hands. Pine Gate offered Caleb $14,000. Caleb told himself he was saving his daughter's semester. He told himself Isaiah was too old to keep farming. He told himself land was only land if it could keep the living from going under. He told himself many things. Under all of them, the oldest one kept breathing. "He chose that field over me." Caleb signed on a Thursday. By Monday, white flags were in Isaiah's ditch line. Naomi Bell's anger was a different weather. She was 44 and worked medical billing in Memphis, which meant she spent 10 hours a day explaining costs to sick people who had already paid with their bodies. She had been the daughter in a family that called need by her name. When Celia got sick, Naomi came home from community college on weekends, then more weekends, then weeks. She cooked, she drove, she learned medication schedules. She sat with her mother while Isaiah worked the fields that supposedly kept them all alive. Her brother was allowed to leave clean. Naomi was praised for staying until praise became a chain. She loved her father. That was never the question. But she had carried an invoice inside her for 20 years. Every missed chance. Every class dropped. Every plan postponed because somebody had to be practical. And somebody always turned out to be her. When Caleb called and told her the land would be sold anyway, when he said there might still be money if they moved before the lawyers did, something in Naomi stopped arguing. She drove to the Bell place on a Thursday evening while Isaiah was at choir. She found the spare key where it had always been. She sat in the blue Chevy and smelled lava soap, diesel, peppermint, and old vinyl. For almost 10 minutes she did not start it. Then she thought of the list inside her chest, and she turned the key. She sold the truck the next morning. Afterward, in a grocery store parking lot, she gripped the steering wheel of her rental car so hard her thumbs hurt. She did not feel free. She felt like someone who had swung an axe and heard the wrong tree crack. What Marcus had in the wash house was a cardboard box that once held a microwave. Inside it were 4 years of deeds, letters, maps, receipts, phone numbers, and one spiral notebook swollen at the edges from being carried too often. The notebook began the night legal aid came to Mount Zion. A lawyer named Vera Sykes stood in the fellowship hall under buzzing lights and drew a family tree on butcher paper. Then she drew lines through it in red marker. "This," she said, "is what happens when a person dies owning land and no plan is made." Marcus had gone because Celia used to go to every workshop that had coffee and pamphlets, and after she died, Marcus kept going in her place. He sat in the back, a hired man with no acre of his own, and watched Vera cut a family's land into fractions with a red marker. Halfway through, his stomach tightened, because he knew, before she said the word Bell, before anybody said the word Moses, Marcus knew the 72 acres were sitting on that same fault line. So he started learning. He went to the Chancery clerk's office on his days off. He paid for copies 1 page at a time. He traced Moses Bell's children, then their children, then the cousins who had moved north and vanished into different last names. There was Aunt Bernice in St. Louis, who owned 1/30th and a shoebox of photographs. There were 2 brothers in Milwaukee, who owned 1/90th each, and thought the land had been sold in the 1980s. There was a cousin in Kansas City, who did not want land, but did want someone to say his grandmother's name correctly. And there was Celia's piece. In 1995, one of Moses's grandsons needed cash and was about to sell his share outside the family. Isaiah did not have the money that year. Celia did. Hair money, church bake sale money, money from hemming uniforms for nurses at the county hospital. $940, kept in a jar behind the flour. She bought that share herself. When Isaiah called it foolishness, she said, "Then let it be useful foolishness." When Celia died, she left a handwritten will. 2 sentences. "I leave my interest in the home place to Caleb and Naomi equally. I want them to keep it if they can." Naomi's share still sat untouched in the records. Caleb's share was the one Pinegate bought. He had sold the piece his mother saved in a flour jar. Marcus found that record and sat in the clerk's office with his hands folded for so long. The deputy asked if he was all right. He was not all right, but he kept going. Vera taught him a phrase, consolidating friendly interests. That meant finding the people who did not want to hurt the land and helping their pieces stop drifting. Marcus bought what he could, not to take the Bell place, to keep strangers from doing it. He paid Aunt Bernice in St. Louis $1,000 over 8 months for her 1/30th. She sent the photographs with the deed. He bought the Milwaukee brothers' small interests for a used riding mower and $400, because one of them had always wanted to say he owned a mower, even if he had no yard. He wrote letters in plain language to cousins who did not answer at first. Over 4 years, on wages that were sometimes short and never large, Marcus Reed assembled a 1/5 interest in the Bell home place. In his own name. He told no one, not Isaiah, not Naomi, not Caleb, because fear is not always loud. Marcus was afraid Isaiah would look at those papers and see a hired man reaching for what was not his. And Marcus had spent his whole life being reminded that belonging could be revoked. He told Isaiah 2 nights before court. He carried the microwave box into the kitchen after supper and placed it on Celia's table. Isaiah looked at the box. "What's that?" 4 years, Marcus said. Then he told him. He told him about the workshop, the family tree, the records, the cousins, the loose shares, the fraction Pinegate bought from Caleb, the white flags. When he got to Celia's jar, Isaiah's face changed. Not all at once, not dramatically. Something behind his eyes simply stopped defending itself. "She bought it herself?" Isaiah asked. "Yes, sir. With what money? Hair money, bake sale money, hems. The record says $940. Isaiah put one hand over his mouth. Marcus kept going because Vera had said the truth had to be whole if they were going to fight with it. He told him about buying the friendly pieces, about Aunt Bernice, about the Milwaukee brothers, about the 1/5 now sitting in Marcus Reed's name. Then Marcus waited for the old fear to come true, for Isaiah to stiffen, to ask why, to say he had crossed a line. Isaiah looked at the box for a long time. Then he said, "You put your money into my land." Marcus swallowed. "I put it into the place Miss Celia told me was home before I knew what that word was supposed to feel like." His voice broke then, and he hated it, but he did not stop. "I never had a name on nothing that stayed. You let me have one here. I was trying to make sure nobody could erase yours." For 7 years, Isaiah Bell had not cried where anybody could see. Not at Celia's funeral, not when her dresses came out of the closet. Not when her voice disappeared from the house so completely he started leaving the radio on just to keep walls from sounding empty. But at that kitchen table, with Moses's syrup tin above the stove and Marcus's box open in front of him, Isaiah lowered his face into both hands and broke, quietly, small, like a man trying not to wake the dead. Marcus came around the table and put a hand on the back of Isaiah's neck, the way you steady somebody stepping off a curb they did not see. Outside, the wind moved through the pecan trees. Inside, the old house held. After a while, Isaiah wiped his face. He touched the box with 2 fingers, the same way Moses had made him touch the deed. "All right," he said. "Tell me how to stand in that courtroom." The Chancery courtroom was colder than it needed to be. Tall windows, bad fluorescent light, a ceiling fan moving slow circles over people who had come to lose things politely. Pinegate sent a lawyer in a charcoal suit, and Hollis Vane in a coat too expensive for the room. They looked calm. Men like that do not rush the law when the law is already walking toward them. Naomi sat in the back row. She had driven through the night from Memphis and told no one she was coming. Caleb was not there. That absence said enough. Isaiah wore his funeral suit. Marcus wore a white shirt Celia had bought him years before, the collar frayed on the inside. Vera Sykes stood when the case was called. She did not shout. She did not tell a story. She did something more dangerous to Pinegate. She put the documents in order. She showed the property had descended from Moses Bell without a will. She showed multiple co-owners related by blood. She showed no family agreement governing sale or partition. She showed that Pinegate had purchased only one fractional interest. Then she asked the court to treat the land under the state's heirs-property partition protections before any forced sale could be considered. The judge was an older woman with reading glasses on a chain. She reviewed the deeds, the chart, the affidavits, Marcus's purchased interests, Celia's handwritten will. The room was so quiet Isaiah could hear paper move. Then the judge said the protections applied. That sentence changed the air. Under the old way, Pinegate could push for a sale and buy the land cheap on the courthouse steps. That was the business model. Buy a sliver, force the whole, bid low, call it legal. But heirs-property protection slowed the machine down. First, the land had to be appraised at fair market value as one parcel, not panic value, not courthouse step value, not the price a family accepts when they do not understand the paper. Second, the co-owners who had not asked for the sale had the right to buy Pinegate's share, the share only, not the house, not the whole farm, not 72 acres pulled through a keyhole, just the fraction Pinegate had purchased. Hollis Vane leaned toward his lawyer. His lawyer did not lean back with good news. The court-appointed appraiser walked the land 3 days later with Isaiah beside him. Isaiah named soil the way some men name grandchildren. That gumbo holds water. That ridge dries early. Don't judge that ditch corner by June. It lies till August. The appraiser valued the cropland and improvements at $298,800. Pine Gate held 1/36th. 1/36th of $298,800 was $8,300. Pine Gate had paid Caleb $14,000. The law did not care what Pine Gate had gambled. The share was worth $8,300, and the family had the right to buy it back for exactly that. When the judge asked which co-owners wished to elect the buyout, Marcus stood. He did not stand as charity. He did not stand as a helper. He stood as an owner of record, a 1/5 owner. His knees felt loose, but his voice did not. "We do, Your Honor." 2 words. "We do." Isaiah stared at the table, not because he was ashamed. Because if he looked at Marcus standing there, he might come apart again in a room full of strangers. Pine Gate's calm was gone. Not rage, worse, arithmetic. They had paid $14,000 for a fraction now worth $8,300. Their forced sale route was blocked. Their leverage had turned into a loss, and the whole thing had been undone by a man they would have called the hired help if they had bothered to learn his name. $8,300 is not a lot of money to a land company. It is a mountain to people who count diesel, medicine, seed, and groceries in the same week. Marcus had $4,100 saved. Isaiah had less than pride would let him say. Vera made calls. An old black farm cooperative 2 counties over stepped in through a USDA-backed heirs-property relending program. The cooperative lent the remaining $4,200 at 1% interest, payable over years instead of panic. Marcus put in his savings. Isaiah signed what he needed to sign. Naomi, without telling anyone first, wired $500 and wrote only 1 line, for Mama's jar. They brought $8,300 to the court within the allowed window. Pine Gate signed its interest away. Hollis Vane left without shaking hands. That afternoon, Marcus and Isaiah walked the ditch line and pulled up 17 white flags. One by one. Isaiah did not burn them. He laid them in the bed of Marcus's truck, drove them to the county dump, and dropped them into the scrap pile. "Don't give that mess ceremony," he said. It sounded like anger. It was relief wearing work clothes, but saving the land from Pine Gate did not clear the danger. The Bell place was still a crowd on paper. 29 names, dozens of fractions, children not yet born who could inherit smaller pieces and one day sell them to someone with a better suit. So the family did the slower work. The work that does not make a dramatic scene but saves a home after the dramatic scene is over. They cleared title where they could. They bought some fractions at fair value. They helped other relatives keep their names on the land inside a written family agreement. No owner could sell outside the family without offering the share back first. No one could force a sale without notice to the others. The people living on and maintaining the land could not be blindsided by a stranger. Aunt Bernice came down from St. Louis for the first Bell reunion in 23 years. She wore a purple hat and carried the shoebox of photographs in both hands. She stood by the pecan row and cried before she even made it to the house. Then she spent the afternoon telling everybody about a Christmas fight in 1964 as if the county had been waiting for testimony. Isaiah listened to all of it. This time, he wrote things down. He sat with Vera and made a will, then a trust, then a folder with instructions in large print. He put Naomi on the home place. He put Marcus on the home place. He left a path for Caleb if Caleb ever came back steady enough to walk it. because fathers do not stop being fathers just because grief gets complicated. When Isaiah signed, his hand shook. Vera offered to steady the page. Isaiah shook his head. "I want them to see the tremor," he said. "Maybe they'll know I waited too long, but I did sign." Naomi bought the truck back. The man in Pine Bluff had cleaned it, waxed it, and raised the price to $10,500. Naomi paid every dollar. The difference was the cost of what she had done. She drove the blue Chevy back to the Bell place at sunset and parked it beside the kitchen steps. Isaiah stood on the porch. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Naomi walked up the steps and sat beside him. "I kept a list," she said. Isaiah looked at the truck. No, Daddy. I kept it like scripture. Everything I gave up. Every time I came home. Every time Caleb got to leave and I had to be useful." Her voice shook, but she did not cry. "I'm not saying the list was false. I'm saying it wasn't the only one." Isaiah turned his hat in his hands. "I should have said thank you more." "You should have said a lot more." Yes, that was all, not an argument, not a speech. Just two people letting the truth sit on the porch without making it smaller. Naomi reached for his hand. His tremor met hers. The truck cooled in the yard, ticking softly under the hood, and the field went dark by degrees. That was their apology, and for that night, it held. Caleb took longer, almost a year. The $14,000 was gone. His daughter found out. Not from Isaiah, not from Marcus. From a cousin who did not know the family was still bleeding. She called her father and asked one question. "Daddy, did you know Grandma bought that piece to keep at home?" He had not known. That was the first clean pain in the whole mess. Clean because it did not let him blame anybody else. Caleb drove to Arkansas in April. No warning, no speech prepared. He came up the lane and saw the blue Chevy in the yard. Saw the white flags gone. Saw his father thinner than he remembered. Saw Marcus unloading seed trays beside the barn. Caleb stopped near the pecan row and stood there like a man whose good shoes had finally reached dirt. Isaiah saw him from the porch. Neither one moved. It was Marcus who crossed the yard first. Caleb braced for anger. Marcus held out a pair of work gloves. "Southfield needs planting," he said. "Your daddy can't bend like he used to." That was not forgiveness. Not yet. It was work. In the Bell family, work had always been the door love used when words could not find the latch. Caleb took the gloves. That Saturday, at 48 years old, he learned where the water stood after rain. He learned why the ditch corner lied in June. He learned that his mother had once cursed a stump, so fiercely the stump seemed embarrassed to remain. Isaiah told him, not all at once, not tenderly, but he told him. It was late. But land is patient in a way people are not. It does not erase what happened. It simply waits to see who will come back and put both hands in it. The Mount Zion workshops grew after the Bell case. People heard the story the way rural people hear things, part fact, part warning, part proof that a thing can happen close enough to your own fence to matter. 40 people came, then 60. Then the fellowship hall ran out of chairs. Vera still drew the family tree on butcher paper, but now Marcus stood beside her, the former stray, the hired man, the man with no people, according to anybody who liked small words. He held the red marker and showed families where land split when nobody made a plan. Then he opened the microwave box. Deeds, receipts, letters, maps, names. 4 years of refusing to let a family's ground become somebody else's opportunity. He did not make it sound easy. He told them the hard part was not the courthouse. The hard part was calling cousins who had been forgotten and asking them to trust the place that forgot them. The hard part was finding money without shame eating you alive. The hard part was teaching old men that a will is not an insult to God. It is a note to the living. Isaiah sat in the back sometimes. Not every meeting, enough. He watched Marcus point to the red lines on the paper. He watched people lean forward when Marcus said, A fraction can sell the whole if you don't know what you're holding. And Isaiah would think of Moses Bell keeping numbers in a syrup tin because the official book had learned to lie. Marcus was keeping the book now. Different paper, same fight. Isaiah lived to see 81. The doctor called it surprising. The family called it stubborn. On Sunday evenings, he sat on the porch with buttermilk in a jelly glass and gospel low on the radio. Sometimes Naomi's car was in the yard. Sometimes Caleb's. Nearly always Marcus's truck. The South rows came in heavy again. More peas, more greens, more okra than one family could use. Isaiah had always grown extra. Celia used to call them mercy rows, food for widows. For old men whose gardens had gone under. For a young mother working nights at the nursing home. He never knocked. He left bags on porches before daylight and drove away before anybody could thank him. Marcus drove the route now. Caleb rode with him sometimes. Naomi kept the list when Isaiah's handwriting got too hard to read. Nobody called it charity. They called it the okra coming in. The syrup tin still sits on the shelf above the stove. Inside it is Moses Bell's deed, Celia's handwritten will, Isaiah's new papers, a family agreement, a feed receipt with Celia's sentence written on the back. Ground don't make you free by itself, but it gives your back somewhere to straighten. Sometimes when the evening light comes low through Celia's kitchen window, Isaiah takes down the tin. He opens it at the table, and whoever is in the room has to touch the paper. Naomi touches it, Caleb touches it, grandchildren touch it and roll their eyes until they are old enough not to. The last person Isaiah made touch it was Marcus. "Why me?" Marcus asked. Isaiah looked at him like the question was foolish. "Because your name is on it." Hired man was never the right word. Not for the one who learned the law. Not for the one who found the cousins. Not for the one who stood in court and said we. Not for the one who carried the other end when blood let go. Be careful with the small names people hand you. Sometimes the man everybody calls temporary is the one who teaches a family how to stay.